If you have ever ordered a genetic test, or maybe are planning to order one of the most important things you need to understand is what it can and cannot actually tell you. A key tool for this is understanding the technology used. So today we're going to go over why medical testing through a healthcare provider is much more comprehensive than the majority of the tests you can order from home. We'll be discussing SNP testing versus sequencing.
Now imagine every gene as a string of thousands of letters, specifically A, C, G, and T, the alphabet of DNA. Everyone's genes are spelled a little differently, and for the most part, we know what letters to expect at what points, and which spelling changes hurt the end product of the gene. Two of the most common technologies used in genetic testing today are next-generation sequencing, or NGS, and SNP, or SNP testing, also called genotyping. SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism, which just means one letter change. These are just two different ways of looking at the same genetic code. Sequencing involves reading through each letter of a gene to look for any spelling changes. SNP genotyping only collects information at specific hotspots along a gene. But for ancestry testing, we use these hotspots since we know the locations of the letter changes in different genetic ancestry groups. These markers act as bookmarks along the genome and don't tell us much about the function of the genes themselves. For ancestry testing, we really just care about if these markers are there. But for health, the function of the gene is more important. We want to know if the gene is making the correct end product. So it's important to look at the whole gene for any changes that could possibly affect its function. Here is an example of a few different people who each have a genetic change in the same gene that causes a disease. Let's see how the different tests do in detecting them. If we use SNP testing, we'll find some, but not all, and that is not a complete test if you're trying to look at your risk overall. If you use sequencing, it will detect a lot more. You can see the missing pieces here.
If you order one of the popular tests like Ancestry DNA or 23andme, they use SNP genotyping. They do not sequence through every letter of your genes. They only collect specific SNP information.
To give you a real-life example, let's talk about the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. Disease-causing variants or mutations in these genes cause a high risk for breast, ovarian, pancreatic, prostate, and other cancers. It's very important information to have since we can get ahead of cancer if we know early. As a genetics community, we found over 3,700 different possible changes that cause disease in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, and there are probably more. 23andme looks at 3 points along these two genes. For this specific example, these 3 variants are found in people with Ashkenazi, meaning European, Jewish ancestry. They are very common, but there are many people who will still have one of the 3,697 other disease-causing variants that will come up negative, even though they are not negative. We call this a false negative. 23andme does explain this in the report several times, but I don't think a lot of people read it once they see their negative result.
So listen, at-home genetic testing has done a lot of good. It's increased public interest in genetics, given us lots of great educational content, and even reached people who would never set foot in a genetics clinic to get tested. But one of the major downsides of this testing is giving people false negative results without a genetic counselor to explain. So if you are truly serious about genetic testing for health, make sure you understand the technology of the tests that you're ordering. Genetic testing ordered through a healthcare provider or genetic counselor is almost always sequencing and deletion duplication analysis. There are some companies that can do this for you that you can order from home, and they include genetic counseling. These companies don't typically do ancestry testing because they are focused solely on healthcare. I will also be posting more videos on how to find the best genetic test for you, so make sure to follow or subscribe.